Good morning or good afternoon, whatever you're joining us today. So welcome to the 16th episode of TZE, the Zion Experience. We've got a special guest here today, Kevin Lawton, and we're gonna introduce Kevin in a minute. But Jordan, you might have heard a little noise right as we were kicking off the podcast. Jordan decided to go backwards on his hat today instead of forwards.
Yeah,
I decided to wear the northern people would call it a beanie.
Right.
Probably. Kevin, what do you call it? A beanie or?
Yeah, I would call it a beanie, definitely.
Yeah, I call it a toboggan, whether that's pronounced properly or not. But yeah, so I decided to go with the toboggan today. So
yeah, toboggan. We take the toboggan down the hill,
Yeah. Right. There you go. And Jordan, which hat did we go with? Did we go with
the Zion hat?
Just the Zion. It's got the Zion. Okay.
Like a 33, I either do no hat, wear it backwards or forwards. It usually has to do. I always give myself a buzz cut. I do a number 2 all the way around. I've done it for I don't know how long, 15 or 20 years, and I just do it myself. So I have to do it about every 2 weeks, depending on where I am in that 2-week venture. Is how often I wear the hat. So right now my hair is a little bit longer, still not very long, but that's when the hat goes on during the podcast. So next episode will probably be out.
See, I'm on the other end of it. I've got like this mess going on, and it's getting light up top. And the worse the lighting is, the lighter it looks. So I'm usually always in a hat or a toboggan or a beanie.
Yeah.
We'll go northern today. Kevin's got a good head of hair, though. Kevin, you got a solid head of hair on you.
Yeah, actually, my hair has been a gift and a curse at the same time. When I was younger, my hair was a lot more red, actually, and very thick. And I had family down in Louisiana, and I would go visit down there, and just random older ladies would grab it and just say, "Oh, Sha, your hair, it's so beautiful." And as a young kid, I'm like, "Oh my God, Mom, what's going on?" Like, get these ladies away.
Mine was never red. My beard was red before it turned gray and dark. And I've got Irish roots as well, and I'm assuming you do as well. And
actually, no.
You're just
everybody thinks that. Yeah. My father's side came over from England, so I guess close.
Okay.
And then my mother's side is from like Austria, France.
Okay.
And it has that kind of Cajun blood in there from Louisiana. So.
Gotcha. That's cool.
Yeah,
my mine was from the Wales area, and so my dad's side came from there, and then my first cousin traced it back, did all the ancestry and looked back and researched it several generations back. And then my mother's side came from, we were Irish immigrants. So cool. Well, I'm totally off track, but let's get back on track. So welcome again to 16th episode of the Zion Experience. We've got a special guest, Kevin Lawton, today. I'm going to introduce him real quick, but we're excited to have him. He's got his own podcast, a much bigger, better podcast than the Zion Experience. So we're going to learn a few things today from him. But he's a cool guy, been in the industry a while. I think everybody's going to enjoy this talk, and we'll have some fun today. So, Kevin, one of the things we like to do is have a little fun and cut up, and we're terrible about staying on track. And Jacob, who's our producer in the background, will send us a chat to get back on track at times. And we try to keep it somewhere between 30, 45 minutes, but we're going to have some fun with it today. So if you're joining us for the first time, welcome. If you're a returning subscriber, thank you for listening. We don't take that for granted. You can find this podcast anywhere wherever a podcast is published, you can find it. You can find the video and podcast out on YouTube. And then we're on Apple, we're on Spotify, we're on Deezer, we're on Amazon. You can find it. So if you haven't subscribe, and hopefully you enjoy spending 30, 45 minutes with us learning about all things supply chain, all things material handling, and just interesting and engaging guests that we have on. So let me introduce our guest. So Kevin Lawton is the founder of the New Warehouse and has been working in distribution and logistics industry since 2012. He began his career, like a lot of us do, as he really started as a temporary employee, and he was in the inventory department in Simon & Schuster. And from there, he grew in the inventory department and moved into various distribution and operation management roles. So he started, in an hourly temp role and went up and got into more of the management and operation role. He was able to be a key player in 4 different new distribution center startups. We're going to definitely have to talk about that a little bit, Kevin. That'd be a good question.
Okay.
Startups are always fun, but he was integral part of that project, as well as has been involved in multiple software updates, another great thing, and transition projects. So you've hit them all: startups, software updates, and inventory transition, like the bread and butter of distribution.
Yeah.
And then you've had experience dealing with several different systems. I think it's Manhattan, SAP, Oracle, Prelude, if I pronounce that right, and DIQ, and just various types of automation, such as like voice picking. And then you've been involved with some goods to person picking. And your passion really is to continuously learn and share the knowledge, which ultimately led you to the creation of the new warehouse. And I'm going to let you introduce that. And so, Kevin, Thanks for being on, man. We're glad to have you. You got about 11 years, about to turn 12 years in this crazy industry, and interested for your perspectives on it. So fill in the blanks that a bio can't. Kevin, tell us a little bit about yourself and just,
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I know, Jim, I had you on my podcast recently too. So it's great to flip the sides of the table a little bit here, or the sides of the microphone, maybe, however you want to say it. But yeah, it's great to be on. Great to talk to people in the industry as well. And I think that's kind of where my passion lies within the industry, is being able to just not only help people create awareness around what's going on in the industry, but also learn about what's going on in the industry too, and hear about some of those stories and challenges that people have around different things that are happening. Like you mentioned, the warehouse startups and the software upgrades, and sometimes those can get a little hairy, I guess we could say, right? So you get some interesting times and certainly a lot of learnings from those. So I'm always interested to hear those stories from people. But I think at the root of everything, as you mentioned in there, is really that kind of continuous learning, whether I'm learning myself or I'm helping people to learn as well. I mean, that's really the mission overall of the new warehouse, is to be able to provide that kind of learning and awareness and creation of getting things out there, so people are aware of what's going on in the industry. I think, the one thing I noticed and realized as I started this thing was that, for me, I was interested in learning more as a warehouse manager at the time. But I realized that, hey, if I do a career where I'm going to be with this company for X amount of years, I may not get exposure beyond what the company is willing to look at or work on, and not have that awareness. So how do I create something where somebody could quickly digest some information about other solutions that are out there that otherwise they might not come across, because either their company's not looking at those types of things, not necessarily willing to invest in them, or just aren't that forward thinking, maybe, in a sense. And how do we bring some of those things to the table so people are aware of them, and then maybe even be able to bring them into their operation and things of that nature. So that's kind of been the mission. It was a selfish mission, I guess, in the beginning, because I was trying to learn myself, right? And then it just kind of grew into this thing that now we've been doing this podcast for almost 5 years at this point. Started back in 2019. So yeah, that's kind of some of the blanks there, I guess you could say.
That's pretty cool. I think some stuff you left out, that is, you also do some teaching, I believe, yes. And then we'll go into this a little more, or as much as you want. But then you also got another little venture where you've started your own warehouse. So is both those things are there. Maybe even Jordan doesn't know about that. But tell us a little bit about your teaching. I don't know that I fully know all the info on it, and maybe a little bit about your new venture, and then we'll dive into the podcast a little.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds good. So on the teaching side, I would say that I went to Rider University for undergrad. I went for actually my major was entrepreneurial studies, and I minored in event planning and arts administration. Actually, so nothing to do with supply chain. Actually, when I graduated Rider, that was the first graduating class where they had a supply chain major graduating. So very new at the time. This was 2010 when I graduated, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, to be completely honest. And I mean, I knew I wanted to have a business at some point, but didn't feel like I had quite the idea or big idea. This was like around the time that all these big startups, tech startups were coming around. Like when I started college, that's when Facebook came out. So I felt like I needed a big idea. Felt like I didn't have one. So I stuck around Ryder for a little longer and got my MBA actually. And then by getting connected with people and stuff is kind of how I ended up in that inventory role that you talked about there with Simon and Schuster. And then over time, as I got more invested and started to embrace the supply chain and specifically warehousing distribution types of things, I got involved with ASCM, which is the Association of Supply Chain Management, and our local chapter here in New Jersey, which is the Princeton region, South Jersey chapter. I ended up getting certification through them with the CLTD certification. And through that, I saw an opportunity for us as a chapter to connect with students who were supply chain majors and help them, get connected with supply chain professionals out there, maybe do some events with them or something. And my closest connection was Ryder because I was a alumni there. And you see, I represent them back here on the shelf too, actually. So big ties there. And through that, I got connected to the head of the supply chain department. And there was a professor that was retiring that taught a class that revolved around ERP, management information systems for supply chain and SAP specifically. And he knew that I had some SAP experience. So he asked me if I wanted to adjunct and try it out. And so I went for it. And so I've been teaching that class for I think this is my 5th semester. We just had our last class of the fall semester yesterday, actually. And this semester, I also picked up Intro to Supply Chain as well, which is certainly a nice contrast because that's mostly freshman, sophomore, just kind of starting out in school, and the other class has been traditionally a junior level class, so a little more established students. So it's an interesting contrast there, I will say. But it's been really, really a lot of fun. And it's great to be able to bring like the real world experiences from my career into the classroom and apply those to the theories. And a lot of the feedback from the students has been that they really appreciate that versus just getting the theory side and kind of the practice and seeing more of the practical application, right? Where we talk about like we talked about slotting recently in Intro to Supply Chain, and I talked about some of the complex slotting projects that I've been a part of, and what that means, and like how in detail that can go, and how complex slotting can get as well, and then some of the technical technology applications and advancements that we see around some of these things too, which I get a lot of exposure through the podcast from. And it's been great to kind of tie that together. And I've even had some students work for me as well in the other new venture that you mentioned there, Jim. So it's been great to kind of bring that back to my school, not only from the perspective of teaching, but also the involvement through the ASCM chapter and creating mentorship programs and getting them different exposure to people and connecting them to my network and stuff. So it's been a fantastic experience on that side. And then the new venture, as you mentioned, we opened a small 3PL doing e-commerce fulfillment last year in 2022. And then since we've moved, we've gotten a little bit of a larger space back in August, and we're continuing to do e-commerce fulfillment as well. And now we're really on the path to expand that and grow that in the new space going into 2024.
That's awesome, man. And I love the perspective of giving back. I think your podcast started with, you said some maybe you could look at it and call it selfish, but I think some people are just lifelong learners, right? I think you said that, but it's really about having curiosity and just being a learner. And I liked how you incorporated in that, when you work for one company, that's sometimes all you get to see. And so being a systems integrator, my background, as I'd shared with you, was, UPS, and I worked in the 3PL side of UPS. So I think we had, an incredible amount of different companies that we got to work with. So it was always fresh. There was always a new challenge. There was always a new problem. And then as a systems integrator, I mean, that's the best way to describe a systems integrator is it's always changing. There's always a new problem. Jordan, you get to live in that space a lot of, you see a new problem, you've got a new problem in front of you every day, and the ability to continuously learn and find out about this rapid changing environment of where technology is changing every day. And, there's something new coming out. There's a new way to solve the problem that comes out. So I think that's pretty cool that, that's where the new warehouse started. How many podcasts you've got different flavors of the new warehouse. So you got some talk, sometimes it's video, sometimes you're on a road show. So how many different podcasts do you think you've done or different tapings? And then how have you broken that content up, I guess, a little bit?
Yeah. So let's see. So traditional podcasts, like audio only episodes. I think we just released episode yesterday, was 443rd episode yesterday of the audio podcast. And then, as you mentioned, we do some video now as well. We've really kind of focused on that in the last year, and trying to build that up. We will be pretty much going almost 100%, I'll say 90% video in 2024, which people have been asking for. And we see that YouTube is pushing podcast as well. So I'm going to try and take advantage of that. But altogether, if we include all the live streams and video visits, it's got to be at least 500 or more. I have no idea how many videos, to be honest, we have, but it's got to be that, because we probably do 20 to 30, if not 40 recordings at the trade shows that we go to, when we have a booth and we set up there, and we'll be doing that coming up this year too. We'll be at Manifest with a booth. We'll be at Modex with a booth. We'll be at the Retail Supply Chain and Logistics Expo with the booth, and we'll be doing live streams from there, which we then take and then we cut up those conversations and release them later on. We've been releasing a series of conversations from CSCMP Edge over the last couple of weeks now too. So we try to take that content as much as possible and get it out there, and help to have the audience be aware, as we talked about, and learn. And then also we talk to like a lot of startup companies too in the space, and try to give them some exposure too, and all different kind of learnings. And we've really been focusing too on trying to bring in more shippers as well, to get their side of the story or perspective too. So it's been it's always evolving, always growing, much like in the warehousing world, right? Continuous improvement, and trying new things and doing new things.
I'll jump in. So Kevin, just with all the different types of podcasts you're doing, it sounds like, when you started the new warehouse, it was more so about, I'm going to go back to that same thing of, it didn't come from a selfish place, but it came from a selfish place of, I want to learn more. I want to know more about what's going on in the industry. I want to be exposed to more. I want to have more knowledge of what's available from all aspects, right? Not a singular area, but software, technology, to your point, shipping, all of it, the whole supply chain, right? So as you were building your podcast, you've now done over 500 different episodes. I'm sure you've come up with some themes or trends, and I know that it's got to be changing from almost probably a monthly basis. But the year of 2023, we're in December now. Just to kind of put you on the spot in 2023, what do you feel based on what you had? What did you see as the overarching trend throughout your podcasts?
Oh man, I think 2023 for sure is like the year of AI, at least. I mean, not only in our industry, but like every industry.
Yeah.
I think in just like general life too. I mean, everybody is talking about AI. I mean, the number of times people have just asked me like, "Are you using AI in your warehouse?" Like, is crazy in the past year. And we've certainly had a bunch of guests on the podcast. Actually, actually, the one we had yesterday is utilizing AI from like safety. Productivity perspective, utilizing existing security cameras that are in place. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the big overall trend, at least from a discussion perspective. I think around AI, some of the challenging parts there are what are the actual practical applications where AI can come into place within the warehouse or the fulfillment center, and be leveraged and utilized in a way that's easily taken on, right? I think one of the discussions around AI that I've had a couple times on the podcast and through LinkedIn or in person is where do those practical applications come in, right? I mean, I think if we look traditionally, especially if we look at a lot of the small, medium-sized businesses, right, that are shipping, whether it's from a 3PL perspective or whether it's they're doing their own fulfillment, own shipping, there can be traditionally rigid in a sense, right, or averse to change, right? If something's working, like why are we gonna bring something new in, right? There's that fear of breaking something and not being able to ship, right? I mean, that's probably the scariest thing in our industry, right? Not being able to ship. I mean, that's
Yep.
our
Yep.
water, right? So, I mean, I think when we look at AI, like there's a lot of really great solutions that are coming out and ideas around it, but it's like, how do we take those solutions and how do we bring them in so that they're easily workable within our existing operation and easily picked up by that warehouse manager or warehouse supervisor, to be able to do that. And I think some of the most interesting applications are ones that are making that warehouse manager supervisor more powerful by harnessing all of the data that they most likely on a daily basis don't have the time to analyze and get through. And if you look at that smaller to medium sized business, it's not necessarily typical that they would have like a data scientist, right, or a data person on staff, right? It'd be the expectation that they're just going to handle that when they can. And a lot of times, maybe they're looking at those metrics when it's potentially too late, or they're missing trends because they don't have the time to analyze and digest all that data. So I think some of those kind of I guess they're calling them like co-pilot type AIs, right, for warehouse manager supervisor. It is really the cool part, I think, about it, because it takes that manager, it gives them insights, better ideas, and sometimes call outs too in some of these technologies on where they can improve things, or where there might be a potential issue, and have them take those actionable steps a lot faster than if they were to have to try and figure that out and digest that data themselves. So I would say that's probably the biggest trend over 23 that I've seen around discussion and just overall companies either coming out with some type of AI solution or adding that to like their portfolio. I mean, I think One thing for sure is that we went to trade shows this year. I mean, as you kind of walk the booth, like you even see some companies that just like added in AI like to their name, I think,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that's certainly like something that's been the overarching trend and focus on discussion throughout the year.
Yeah, I mean, I think we would agree. We did a previous podcast a little bit about AI and machine learning and how it's being integrated into the distribution center. And I think you said a couple of things there, but the co-pilot idea we have also seen, and
Mm,
it's really a result of you got to build up trust to an AI type system, right? And traditionally, when you're putting in software or you're putting in a fix, you're in somebody at least that knows the business is in control of how the system's going to work.
mm,
And you know that if there's a problem, maybe you tweak something else and you tweak, and then that causes you to tweak something else. And it's an ever changing process, but you're continuously improving upon that base foundation that you put in. AI allows you to do the same, but it kind of starts off with like that black box type of look of
mm.
what am I really getting into here? How does this work? And when you don't understand how something works, it becomes really hard to intuitively trust it to run your business, right? So by leveraging the co-pilot idea, you can build up that trust. And the other scary thing that we've seen, not scary, but thing that we've seen too, Kevin, is to your point, there's a lot of technologies out there that have integrated AI into their own software. And a big focus is, we mentioned earlier, slotting. So when you think about a goods to person system, having having your product slotted appropriately within a goods to person system can allow you to achieve additional volume with a lower number of robots because they're not having to drive as far. They're not having to bring as many presentations forward. But when you get into an AI type slotting and you want to completely put your trust in that, it can make or break your entire distribution center. So what
Yeah.
ends up happening is they may try a round of it. It doesn't go super well, right? So then they say, you know what, we're putting this on pause. We're taking over, and they kind of push it to the side. And when you do that, the AI doesn't really have time to learn and then build upon itself and make it better. So I think as just a total society, especially in an industry that historically is a little behind when it
Mm,
comes to some of the technology that we utilize, it's just going to take some time to build up the trust and see that, hey, this actually can work. This can make my facility better, and to let your guard down a little bit, right? Because warehouse managers will always be critical to the success of an operation.
yeah.
AI isn't there to displace them. To your point, it's there to help. It's there to supplement. It's there to exemplify, right? So I think I agree with you. We've seen similar trends. You know, I think the whole robotics technology that's been going on for years now. It's just a different
Mm,
flavor of it, but definitely this was the year of AI. Every conference we were at, it came up. There was
yeah.
talk shows on it, or there was a talk on it, and got a little redundant at times, but it was definitely the trend of 2023.
Yeah, yeah, and I think to your point there too around the warehouse manager. I mean, we have to think that um, most people that are in a warehouse manager, warehouse supervisor position didn't really go to school for AI or robotic applications or things like that. So that trusting is a big thing, right? And I think when you be able to show them, like you said, this can help you and help you make better decisions. You start to get like those little tiny wins like from those solutions and applications, and then that leads to that trust building over time. But I think also from if there's anybody that's listening that's developing like some of these types of solutions, you have to keep that in mind, right? That maybe whoever is developing it is coming from a tech background, right? So they're thinking like, oh, why can't somebody understand the way this works or how it functions, right? But from the warehouse side, like we're not necessarily coming from that tech background, right? If we're on the floor and we're getting things done on the day to day, so it needs to be able to be practical and digestible in a sense to get that adoption overall.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think it's an excellent point. That last one is, Jordan, you remember we were at the Next Gen conference, Kevin, and we ended up sponsoring it. And there were some talks, and one of the people that spoke was I won't get it wrong, but I think it's Stephanie Cannon, and you
From
may have
Pitney
spoken to Stephanie.
Bausch,
She's
yeah.
a Pitney. Pitney Bowles, and she does a lot of different conversations. But one of the things I took away from her talk was the how they're renaming the associates to be robotic associates. I'm paraphrasing. I'm not going to get this perfect, but they're training people specific to handle the robotics and the automation that they're bringing in. And I think it's critical to get buy-in from the people that actually are working with it every day. So anytime you throw something, I learned that really early in my career. I'm an industrial engineer, and I thought I could sit in my little cubicle and I made a mean spreadsheet and I solved all the world's problems. And I walked out and went to the operations team and gave them a real pretty printout. I had all the good colors. I was a green and yellow guy. So here it is. You can do this with, let me tell you how you can do this. You can do it with 2 people and inbound. You can do it with 3.25 people and put away. And here, you need 15 people to run your operation and walk away. And how successful that was, you all can take a real big guess of how successful that was. And I learned a long time ago in my career is you make people part of the solution, you involve them in the problem and the decision-making process, you've got a way better chance of success in that problem. And I think you have to recognize that the skill sets in the warehouse today versus the technology that's being introduced to those skill sets in the warehouse, there's a real large gap there. So companies have to find a way to reduce that gap. And you can do that multiple ways. I thought it was a really cool idea to call them, robotic employees, and to get them certification on different levels of robotics and technology. I thought that was a neat way to solve the problem and get buy-in. And, AI to me reminds me of probably 5 years ago, maybe it's a little more, but you all probably realize this is when the word WES came out. And one of the first companies that was doing it, it's no longer available to the market, is RedWorks, but we were very involved with RedWorks, and they called it a warehouse execution system. And today, every company that does any type of software controls calls themselves a warehouse execution system. Yeah. And AIs, I've seen a similar trend of everybody got really excited, and anything that is, maybe it's just high level logic, they're calling it AI. AI is very specific to me, and machine learning and large language models and how you apply that to problems in tech. But everybody's on, we've got AI, we're doing AI. I had a conversation about this yesterday with a consultant team that we work with, and just what he asked my views of AI and what he was seeing as far as AI, and mine kind of came back to us. I think everybody is just throwing up that they've got AI, but the ones that really have it, it's small. And I think we'll see that evolve. But the skill sets in the warehouse and the management teams in the warehouse have to catch up to it. And as a systems integrator, we don't just throw out, like, we're not a buzzword type systems integrator to where we've got AI. We want to make sure that we view ourselves as teachers, we view ourselves as problem solvers, and we want to make sure we understand it before we just jump on the bandwagon and say we're using AI everywhere. So that's pretty cool. Let me ask you a question. You asked me this in my interview, and I thought it was interesting. So I'm gonna flip it back to you. Yeah. What are some of the? It's a 2-part question. So what are some of the biggest problems that you're hearing about, or as a logistics provider, you're seeing in the industry that companies are facing? So we talk a lot about we go in to solve problems. We like to ask, where's your pain? And we want to help solve a problem versus push products. Jacob C's telling me to wrap it up right now, Kevin. So we're going to have to be like concise, but we don't really, but we want to keep it. We got about 10 minutes left. So I'm going to let you have the stage, but what are the biggest problems you're hearing about or seeing or experiencing as your own company? And then what technologies get Kevin excited? What are you excited about? So just a 2-part question.
Sure. Yeah. I think the first part of the question, right? What are some of the challenges? I think that, well, first I want to say, I think it's interesting because you guys both pointed out that the industry is traditionally a little slower to adopt new technologies, but it's also very interesting that a lot of these new technologies that are coming out, like AI, robotics, and all these different things, right? Where they really find their practical industry applications is like within our industry, which I think is really cool. Something that's really cool about our industry, but then also kind of contrasts itself a little bit because we're a little slower to adopt in most cases, right? But I would say I think that one of the biggest challenges right now is that, like, if you go to a ProMat or a Modex and you walk around, the amount of solutions that are out there is overwhelming. And I think for people that are, I think we've reached that point where people realize that, like, hey, we need to get some type of automation to be able to keep up, to be able to grow into the future. Labor issues don't seem to be really getting much better. Depending on where you are, I mean, especially in these like high concentration pockets of the country where there's lots of warehouses, it's very competitive to get labor. So I think it's really the question of like, where do I go? Like, in what direction, right? I think that's really one of the biggest challenges. Like, if I was, which I guess I am, if I'm a shipper, right, and I walk into ProMat this past year and I'm thinking like, oh yeah, I need to get some automation in here. And I look around, just like, where do I even start? Right. Like, and there's like the shiny object stuff, right? The new stuff that's cool, like the truck unloading and everything like that. But if I don't have any automation in place yet, like, that's probably not the first thing I want to start with, right? But how do I navigate that, and how do I figure out like where do I start? Like, I would say that's probably one of the biggest challenges out there, right? Is like getting that your head around just the enormous amount of options there are, and then trying to figure out where do I even start in automation or robotics, and going down that path. Like, how does that begin for me, and how do I make sure that I'm making this investment? Because oftentimes it's a pretty big investment, right? I mean, even with some of the RAS models and things like that, I mean, you're still making an investment in getting this set up, and sometimes it means you got to change your systems around to be able to accommodate and adapt to these things. But that's probably the biggest challenge, I would say, is just the overwhelming amount of options that are out there. And then second part of the question is, oh, what's the most exciting, right, that I see out there?
Yeah, what technologies excite you? Yeah, what are you
Sure.
seeing that's in the market, is in the market?
Yeah. Man, I see so much stuff, so it's it's very hard to
Which
pick because
shiny
everything is.
object does Kevin like the
I
best?
mean,
Let's go
everything is.
that way.
Yeah, everything is so cool. I mean, I love the fact that this past year has really been kind of the big rollout of container truck unloading automation. I worked for a company where we did, 7 to 8 floor loaded containers a day. And I saw how much of a pain and how tough of a job that is. I mean, luckily I was not doing it. So, but it was very hard to keep people in that job for a long time. It was very hard to, bring temps in and get them to last for a little bit. I mean, once they get like a half a day of, unloading a floor loaded container that's, loaded up to the ceiling with cases, like, it's very difficult. So I love that that's coming into the space, because I think that's like a much needed automation thing. It's just like not a great job to have. I mean, it sucks, honestly. And I hate that people have to do that. I think it's like backbreaking work, and it should be easier. And I love that too. The approach to it is that when you look at ProMat, I mean, I think there was like Mugen has the solution. Boston Dynamics has one. Pickle had one. And I think Fox Robotics was the other one. And then there's also Slip Robotics, which is looking at a little bit different, but they're all like different approaches to solving that problem. Like, I can't say that like those solutions like all look the same, right? Which I think is pretty cool and exciting around that. So that really was exciting for me this year. And then I think the other one too, which I learned about recently, which is pretty cool. I'm pretty interested in ASRS systems for myself personally, like future looking for R3PL. I think that we may end up going that route somewhere down the line, because I have this kind of have a little personal obsession with seeing like how high of a throughput can I get from like a small space. Like I want to like just maximize out. Like I'd love to like one day take like 1,000 square feet and just say like, man, how many packages can I get out of 1,000 square feet like in one day, and just go like focus on that as like a little passion project. But I think Reputa Robotics, their ASRS is pretty interesting from a build and structural component. It's like it's almost like if you remember Kinects, like they're like sticks that go into like these little gears and build things kind of like Legos, but not blocks really.
Yeah.
It almost builds like that. They actually had like kids building contest to build an ASRS structure. It was like little kids just putting this stuff together. I mean, super flexible and easy to put together from that perspective, which I think allows it to, you know, kind of conform to some maybe non-traditional spaces that you could put that in. So I thought that was really cool. And I think those kind of more user friendly, user being able to do their own changes when they want to type of technologies, I think is really exciting. So so I'll leave it at those kind of two things there, but those are some things that I think are pretty cool right now.
It's pretty awesome. Yeah. I think Jordan and I would say we're seeing the same challenges, same problems as where do you start? And it obviously is good for a systems integrator, because that's where we help guide
That's what you do.
intelligent change. Yeah, I can plug that in, right?
Yeah.
We're all about delivering memorable experiences and guiding intelligent change. That's really our vision statement. And that's where we get to come in and help people. Is you don't have to go to the shiny object. You may need to start your journey in a different place. You may need something like to clean your inventory up and to make sure your slotting's right and do some of the basics. You may need to just have people in the right place. You may need to have new management. You may just need gravity conveyor, or you could need an ASRS system and the highest level of software that's out. So I agree with you. It's overwhelming if you're not educated in the space or have a team that can help you in the space. There's just little way to try to do that while you run your main job and while you're doing your operations, because that's an all-consuming task. If you've ever been an operator on the floor, it's you don't have all this free time to just look around and try something new. You're just happy that Bob and Sally and Sue and Charlie showed up today, and the four that didn't, you try to figure it out, and there's a new challenge that comes up and some exception pulls you off. So I think that's a really good perspective. And I'm going to look up the last company. Say that one more time. The one that's the ASRS. That's a new name to me.
Yes. It's Reputa Robotics.
Okay.
So they have, yeah, I think they're like the largest robotics company in Japan, but they're expanding into the US, I think, like as of this year. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. I'll send a video to you of it too. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, we'd like to send that. We'll try to add that to the show notes. If Jacob's already all over it, and we'll try to add that to the show notes. So last question.
Sure.
And we're going to wrap this up. You've been an amazing guest. Thank you again for the time. Just really enjoyed. I'm a learner. I wear people out because I'm a learner. I like meeting new people. I like hearing other experiences. I'm constantly have my eye on the next technologies and what's new and what's different, almost to a fault sometime. But thanks. Really appreciate having you on here. And favorite warehouse, let's call it a war story. So you've been involved in new startups. You've been involved in inventory transition, and you've been involved in some software implementation. So there has to be a great story out of one of those. What's your favorite war story that, define war however you want? It's probably a bad use of the term, but supply chain wars. Like that's what would you say is your favorite?
That sounds like another good podcast, actually. Supply chain wars. I like
Just
that.
off the same thing. Like we're gonna have to brand that supply chain wars.
Some kind of series or something, right?
Let's do it.
Well, I mean, I would say probably the most. I think that they are very time consuming and intensive when you're doing like new facilities and things like that. But I would say you learn a lot. So the one I think I learned the most was we took. So I signed on for this job, and the idea was that we were going to. I was the inventory control manager. Was the job that I took, and the idea was that they had this old warehouse in Brooklyn, New York, and then one in Long Island. We were going to take those, consolidate them, bring them down to a new kind of state-of-the-art facility in New Jersey, right? So I'm like, oh, okay, sounds good. And I had done some previous new facility startups in my last job, so I'm like, oh, okay. And so then the first time I go to this warehouse in Brooklyn, I was like in shock. Like it was so old. Like the floors were wooden in the warehouse, right? The pick carts were shopping carts that they had got from a liquidation of a retail store, something like that. They were picking on paper, and the like overall picker culture was a little wild. Like they were like hiding bags of snacks in bins. So as they were picking, they would go and grab a snack, right? And then they were paying for performance, but the pickers were smart enough to realize that like they could see the order, right? Because they had the paper. So they were like, oh, I get more money for this one. This one I won't get so much. So they would take the papers and just like hide them in the shelves, right? And then at the end of the day, they would try and figure out where are these orders, and try to match them up. So that was a little crazy. And then overall, we took that, we went from that to we put in like a Dematic multi-shuttle system, voice picking, these GTP pick stations, and they had complexity of items, and it was just a wild ride. And it was small business, so there was not like a big team that was involved in all these projects, so it ended up being a lot of me trying to figure out on the floor. I became like the SME for all the systems and everything, and it was just such a wild journey of ups and downs, but huge learnings. And I think like, when I realized like, man, I think I really want to do my own thing. At some point, it was like, I think it was like midnight, 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning or something. I was like up in the multi-shuttle system, like on like the 4th or 5th level in the tower, like clearing a jam. And I was just thinking like, man, what am I doing? What am I doing right now? Basically, right? And but I learned so much from that, and there was so much complexity to that because there's so many different type of items that they were distributing, from small eyeliner pencils to hampers that were non-conveyable, and just so many layers of complexity to having nail polish and having to kind of throw together a hazmat room because of the township's requirement. We were like just hitting the threshold because of that nail polish. And all those things, it was such a big learning. Like I feel like, working there and doing this project for a year, like I feel like I learned what I would have learned in like 5, 6, 7, maybe even like 10 years time. So I would say that was like a huge battle overall, war, if you want to call it that. But coming out on the other side, it was just like such a great learning experience, and just being able to get so hands on with everything. That was probably the biggest one that stands out over time.
That's pretty awesome. We need to find something. I'm not great on the spot, but like we need to find famous warehouse moment, and I think you hit it. Like everybody, I don't know what we call that, but everybody's had one of those 1:30, 2 o'clock well,
Yeah.
maybe not everybody, but if you've been in the industry long enough,
Oh yeah.
you've sat at the back of a warehouse by yourself and like, how am I going to solve this problem? How did I get here? Number one, and how am I going to get out of it? And or maybe it's 1:30 up in the multi shuttle system trying to figure out a jam, and you're just like, what in the world? But you look back at those moments, and they're like a lot of life moments. Is you learn so much, you find out who you are, and you develop that customer empathy or that operational empathy or that company empathy to where, how do I never get there again? And the good ones come out of it, and you make the world a better place and the warehouse a better place because of it. And that's awesome. Appreciate you sharing that. So we're going to wrap it up. We're at 50 minutes. I've really enjoyed it. Any final thoughts or comments, Jordan or Kevin, either one?
No, I just appreciate you being on here, Kevin. I also enjoyed just talking through it, learning from your perspective, talking through some of those past experiences. So thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you guys for having me on. And love what you guys are doing too as well. And it's great to be a part of this. And yeah, if people want to learn more about the New Warehouse, just check out thenewwarehouse.com.
Perfect.